It's 7:31 on this Monday evening. You're listening to the East Polk Farm Bureau Legislative Forum, and our next guest joining us, DFL candidate for State Senate District 1, Reed Perkins. Reed, thanks for joining us. Nice to have you on the program tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for hosting for KKCQ. I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about myself, my values, and my platforms to voters in the district and here in Fosston. So my name is Reed Perkins. My background is as a science teacher. I have a wife who's active duty military, and we've moved around the country for the last 10 years or so, and it's really left me with the impression of how lucky I was to be born and raised here in Minnesota. Now that I'm back, I want to take the skills that I've learned in my background and put that to use in making certain that other people have the exact same opportunities that I did. I want to be able to give back to a state that gave me so much. So in terms of my background as a scientist and what that means from a legislative perspective, I'm not looking for the Democratic answer. I'm not looking for the Republican answer. I'm looking for the answer that works. I want to look at what do the experts say on an issue? What does the data say on an issue? If I'm looking at, say, a farm bill that's being crafted, I want to talk to the expert farmers that we have in this district to make certain that their expertise is brought to bear. If I'm looking at a new problem, I want to look at, did another state tackle something similar to this? And if they did their attempt work? Did it not work? Is that something we can learn from? There's no reason to reinvent the wheel there, and looking to other data points and looking to experts is a big part of my philosophy and the way I approach problems. As far as these last couple years running for office, I've made several thousand phone calls around in the district now talking to voters, and that includes over 550 phone calls here in Fosston, and spending multiple Saturdays sitting with a booth at the Fosston Farmers Market, talking one-on-one to voters, because that's the best way to find out what people need. And as it turns out, we have most of the shared values. We have those shared needs across party lines, because as it turns out, we all live here in Northwest Minnesota, so our same basic needs are there. And talking to everyone, making certain everyone is included in that conversation, allows me to then bring those voices to St. Paul. And if I'm elected, I promise to make certain that I will come back and continue having those conversations, because it is only with that constant updating and constant talking to your constituency that you can be certain that all of Northwest Minnesota is brought and has their needs brought to the table.
All right, very good. Well, we'll get to our very first question here, Reed, pertaining to COVID-19. The COVID-19 state mandate shut down many businesses and public activities for schools, and as we all know, safety is important, but economic stability is also important. How do you see the governor's response to the pandemic so far?
Yeah, that balance between safety and economic prosperity is absolutely vital. So there's obviously a lot to dig into with COVID, and the governor's response, some of the things that I've liked, some of the things I haven't liked. I think it's important to note up front how successful safety-wise Minnesota has been compared to other states. We look next door to North Dakota. They have the highest per capita case rate in the nation. If we had the same case rate that North Dakota did, we would be seeing additional thousands of Minnesotans dead. And so I think it's important to note, we have the most testing of any state that we border. We have the least cases per capita of any state that we border. We have the lowest positivity rate of any state that we border. And we're doing so well, we are taking COVID cases from other states and helping them here, which is what you should do, be helping your neighbors. But I think we need to note our success in fighting the disease on those terms. But the economic impact is still there. So what could we have done differently to make certain that our businesses didn't suffer as much? Two big things that I look at. One, as I said, my wife is active duty Air Force, so I spend a lot of time on Grand Forks Air Force Base. They had a mask mandate in April and distributed masks to everybody on base. That was key. They made certain that it wasn't hard to follow. And that personal responsibility aspect is so important. If you've seen me out at the Fosston Farmers Market, I wear a mask when I'm doing campaign stops. It is so important to me to do that most basic step. And then additionally, I mentioned in my opening, looking to neighboring states. One thing North Dakota has been very successful at, and this is not just with COVID stretching back decades, they have the highest rate of small business loans per capita in the nation. That PPP funding that came down from the federal government, North Dakota routinely has an extremely successful state to small business pipeline. We can use that as a map here in Minnesota to get our businesses back on their feet faster. But additionally, the sooner we are all wearing masks and the more we wear our masks, the quicker those businesses open. It is the biggest thing that we can do on a personal level to do so. And that's why I wear a mask everywhere I go.
Agriculture. The state's economy is affected by the success of today's farming industry. How do you see the legislature's influence with what happens on farms, be it regulation, taxes, property ownership rights, water, chemical and fertilizer use, and or road and river transportation?
Absolutely. So if we look back to from 1980 to today, about the same amount of acreage is in production here in Minnesota. But back in 1980, we had over 105,000 independent farms. Now we're down to about 73,000. That decrease, while still having the same amount of acreage in place, looks at that corporate consolidation that we've seen hitting our farmers. There is support for farms, but it seems to be going to people who have a banker, an accountant, and a lawyer on staff. We need to make certain that we are supporting our family farms. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's been some talk about the bonding bill tonight. And yeah, especially given that this is hosted by the Polk County Farm Bureau. When I was on my endorsement interview with the Farm Bureau, we talked about Section 179. That was big. That was in the bonding bill. I was disappointed to see my opponent vote against it. When we talk about infrastructure, that road transportation use, that's in the bonding bill. I was disappointed to see my opponent vote against it. The state absolutely has a responsibility to keep those pipelines working. That is the biggest investment that they can make that supports our farmers.
Education. Today's job force needs adequate workers, of course, and many job postings seem to be going unfulfilled. What is the state's responsibility to fill the need, for example, minimum wage or specialized training at AVTIs?
Mm-hmm. So, as I said, my background is as a science teacher. I come from a long line of teachers. Both my grandmas were English teachers, which certainly made Scrabble interesting growing up. But one of the things that again, we talked about growing up here in Minnesota, having those big advantages. The AP testing program, if people are not familiar with it, high school students are allowed to take college-level classes, and then at the end of the year, they take a test, and they receive credits towards a liberal arts degree. This is a very successful program. It's been used in Minnesota for decades. It gives our students a springboard towards a liberal arts degree. Why don't we have the same thing for technical colleges? We have so many opportunities here in the district. If you look up in Roseau, we've got Marvin Windows and Siding and Doors. We've got plenty of opportunities for nursing. We've got plenty of opportunities for welding. We've got plenty of opportunities for all sorts of trades that we normally see come from our technical institutes like Northland Tech, but we don't have the same program that springboards students into those. My background as a teacher, I know students want those opportunities to try out those trades, to get credit for those trades. The state implementing an already working system like the AP program into something for trade schools, I think would see massive support. I think it would see massive use from our students, and I think it would see increased usage of those jobs.
Our next question pertains to housing. As workers find employment, housing is, of course, needed for families. What is the state's role in encouraging affordable housing?
Mm-hmm. And the couple things from this question that really jumped out at me were looking at workers finding employment. Certainly, if you look in Thief River Falls around Digi-Key, or if you look around Polaris, they're trying to bring in workers, and there is this lack of housing. And so it's important to not just talk about, it's not just affordable housing, but making certain that we've got middle-class housing. Because what is happening in cities like East Grand Forks, I know specifically, is we've got people who would be living in middle-class housing instead taking up apartments because that's all that's available, which then takes away that low-income housing from people who actually would need it. So we can't just be looking at building more houses, period. We need to be making certain that we build the correct economic zone of housing. And that's when talking to local mayors when crafting legislation becomes so important.
Senior living. As an aging rural population is upon us, as more post-war babies begin to retire, how can we maintain our population in the area we enjoy?
And this is a big trend in the district. If we look at Minnesota as a whole, we've been climbing in population steadily for decades. And mostly that's concentrated around the urban centers. And that shouldn't be. People don't want to just live in the cities. There are people who want a rural lifestyle, and we need to make certain that's accessible to them. So what can we do to make certain that people are moving here and people stay here? Affordable and accessible health care, which we're going to get to in the next question. But I also want to talk about affordable and accessible child care. I was at a town hall in Warren, in Marshall County, last year, and they were saying that in Marshall County right now, if you want to get an infant into child care, it's over a 1-year wait list. If you have to put a child on a wait list before they are conceived, that is not child care. And you will not get you will not get young couples starting families here if that's not available. That is a need that has to be addressed. And then I get back to farm consolidation. If we are losing our small farmers, we are losing the people who are the backbone of our small towns. When our small towns start to dwindle in population, we see things like what's happening in Middle River with school consolidation. When a town loses its school, again, you're not going to have people moving there to start families. Some of the local mom and pop grocery stores are going to close down. That's going to cause fewer people to live there, which then perpetuates this cycle. We need to bring families back. We're going to do it with healthcare, we're going to do it with childcare, and we're going to do it making certain farmers get their fair shake.
And our final question pertains to medical issues. Access to medical care is important to everyone, young and old. What is the state's role in assuring adequate medical services?
I'm so glad this question starts with access. Too often we start with affordability, but access is key too. I was talking to the Veterans Affairs Coordinator in Roseau County, and he told me about an older veteran who has dialysis. It's covered by this country, so no problem with affordability, but he has to drive down to Grand Forks in order to actually receive that care. So that's over 2 hours one way, 3 days a week for that care. So when we're talking about healthcare, we can't just be talking about affordability. We need to be talking about what support can we have for rural healthcare. And that can mean telemedicine, which means we need to improve our rural broadband situation and have an adequate investment in that. And it also means that we need to be attracting providers to this corner of the state. And we know the single largest group of people who set up their private practices for medical care in rural areas are people who are born and raised in rural areas. We have seen a drastic decrease in the percentage of rural students applying for medical career paths. And this gets back to the education question. If we've given students a springboard by going and interning at a nursing home or interning at a medical care facility, that's going to give them that confidence to go on to be a medical professional, and they are the people most likely to bring that expertise back to the district. So the government can make certain that we have those things by investing in infrastructure with rural broadband and by providing those educational opportunities for our students here.
Very good. DFL candidate for State Senate District 1, Reed Perkins. Final comments?
Well, again, thank you very much for having me. This has certainly been a bizarre year for a lot of things, but especially campaigning. Back in 2019, I sat for days at every single county fair in the district. That just couldn't happen this year. There just weren't the opportunities to get out and meet voters. That's why, like I said, I've made thousands of phone calls into the district, including the 550 here into Fosston. So if you would like to learn more about me or learn about some of my policies, you might have noticed I'm a bit of a policy wonk on the number side. That's that science teacher background in me. I recommend checking out our website, Perkins, spelled just like the pancake restaurant, Perkins for mn1.com. I've got dozens of policies listed there, along with citations that would make any science teacher proud to see on their bibliography. So thank you very much for having me. It was a proud to talk about what my vision is for Northwest Minnesota.
All right, Reed, thank you very much for joining us. DFL candidate for State Senate District 1, Reed Perkins, joining us on our East Polk Farm Bureau Legislative Forum. And when we come back, we'll have State Senator for District 1, Mark Johnson. You are listening to the East Polk Farm Bureau Legislative Forum on KKCQ.
Farm Bureau shares the vision of strength and vitality for our communities, individuals, families, businesses, and organizations. In fact, Farm Bureau itself maintains an active focus on issues that can improve the quality of our communities. That's just one of the reasons to become a Farm Bureau member. To learn about the many other reasons to join Farm Bureau, contact your local county Farm Bureau office. The phone number for Headwaters Farm Bureau is 218-6946-515. Or for the East Polk County Farm Bureau, call 218-563-3774.